I got to call you back, bro. I'm getting ready to go live on my show.
Everything okay?
Yeah, well, I'll talk with you a little later on.
All right, what's up?
Tony, do you have a Zoom link?
Yeah, it's a Zoom. I'm on it.
Okay, well let me let you in.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Welcome, Mr. Henderson.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bethel, how are you today?
Great. Welcome to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America.
Ron, I can't hear you, Ron. Hold on.
We seem to be having some technical difficulty because I'm trying to make sure that you're coming up on the channel. I see iPad too, but I don't see your face. But anyway,
Okay.
I can hear you. Okay,
All
I
right.
can.
Do you see me?
Yes, sir. I can see you now. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I think we're having some technical difficulties. Ron, you are going in and out. I can't hear you.
Well, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Henderson, for joining us today on the night edition. Now, in the
Mr. Bethea, unfortunately, we're having technical difficulties. I'm going to drop out and see if I can come back in and see if that helps.
Let me see. Let me close this on this end here, because I think I've got two windows here. Hello, can you hear me
I'm
now?
here. I can hear you now. Yeah.
We don't have that feedback, right?
No, it's better. It's a better audio now.
Okay, great, great. I had two windows open. Well, let's take it from the top. Thank you once again for joining us today, Mr. Henderson. For my listening audience, welcome to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethea. And you know, if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, then the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. You also know, if you join us every week, ladies and gentlemen, that this show is brought to you by the National Association of Blacks in Solar, which also serves as a 501c3 organization, which mission is to bring more opportunities to African and African American renewable energy companies in all forms in terms of finance, and looking at how we can engage more of our renewable energy design, environmental engineering, and various firms and nonprofits in the renewable energy sector. You also know, if you join us on a regular basis, that this show is also brought to you every week by the Black Sports Legends Foundation, BSLF HB Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative, which you're listening to that initiative over our YouTube channel. And we are happy and blessed today to have on our channel one of our leading African American finance entrepreneurs in the energy sector. A young man that I had the privilege of meeting several years ago at a forum that was put on here in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Energy. And this gentleman's name is Mr. Tony Henderson, who originally hails from the state of Maryland. And he is a proud graduate of the University of Maryland,
Go
which
Terps.
and I will be hosting the director of the Maryland Clean Energy Center on next week on our show here. And we'll be talking about some of the same collaborative issues that we'll be discussing today. But today on our show, I've asked Mr. Henderson to come on and basically talk about the impact that we all are quite aware of that are going on as it relates to the impact of developers, cost design, and the various uh, different hoops that they go through in order to prepare a project to bring it to the stage where it is ready to be considered for financing. There are some very, very important steps in that. But before we do that, we're going to look at the impact of something that has been in the news consistently. Everybody's running around talking about AI, artificial intelligence. We keep hearing the words crypto mining. We keep hearing the word blockchain technology. But most people don't realize that all this is being driven by energy. And we have a slogan here on the platform of this show that everything begins with energy and everything ends with energy. And as with that being said, I'm going to bring Mr. Henderson right on into our show today. And first, thank you for taking time from your very, very busy schedule, Mr. Henderson, to be a guest here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact. And I'd like for you to sort of open up and share a little about your background and how you got into the financing area of renewable energy.
Good morning, and I appreciate time on the show, and good morning to everybody. I've been in the renewable energy industry for about 25 years, energy for about 30 years. I kind of stumbled into it in graduate school. I went to graduate school in Boston and I was involved in a consortium program that was sending over exchange students to Moscow, to the one of the top Soviet universities to discuss international energy security. And lo and behold, I was named the chairperson of the university's team going over to Europe and got involved in it and have been involved in energy ever since. Multiple areas from selling it, buying it, building renewable energy projects to helping other people build renewable energy projects. And then I got into funding, helping other people do renewable energy projects, particularly, and that's accelerated with the signing of the OBBA and its impact it's had on African American owned and operated renewable energy companies. Its impact has been both devastating, but has also put urgency in the pipeline so that people are being forced to make decisions now quickly instead of just kind of letting the decision lag and lag and lag. But that's how I got into it.
Well, Tony, you have a company imbalance, and your company does it helps to obtain SBA 504 green loans for real estate purchases and or projects at a competitively low interest rate. You provide comprehensive energy assessments, renewable design, and lead certifications services for the CDC and lender partners to facilitate SBA 5 for green loan programs on behalf of your clients. Could you sort of go into that and break down and explain to our listening audience what that is about and some of the projects and some of the clients that y'all are working with currently?
Sure, sure. The Green 504 loan and its name is being changed to the manufacturer 504 loan because of the current administration. But the Green 504 loan has been a Commerce Department SBA loan that's been available for projects for the last 30 years or so. It's a great economic development tool that most people don't know about. In essence, the SBA will help a small business owner either buy a building and retrofit it or build a new building and help it understand its energy usage. And if the building of the owner or the client can prove to the SBA that they will produce a minimum of 15% of the energy they use on an annual basis, both electricity and natural gas combined, if they can produce 15% of that energy load on site from renewable energy, the Commerce Department will double their participation in the loan up to about $12.5 million. It's a great loan for people who want to buy a property or upgrade an existing property they already own, and helps us meet our energy goals as a nation. Right now, the loan rates on a 20-year SBA 504 loan are only at 6%. They're very, very competitive, and they help business owners really begin to utilize their energy load as an advantage, not just as a cost.
Okay, the recent a cut by the Fed on the energy interest rates, has that had any impact on lowering the actual interest rate on this 504 loan?
Uh, That's a great question. It may have brought it down about 2 basis points, but hasn't had a significant impact yet. The quarter point drop that the Fed did, can have significant impact across the board for on a number of opportunities. But as of right now, it isn't really impacting the financing of renewable energy.
Okay, well, one of the things that you pointed out to me, you sent me some very, very important and informative information, and you laid out how projects are designed. And one of the things you laid out was a 90% design for solar projects is a late stage engineering milestone in design and development process. It indicates that the design package is substantially completed. About 90% of all drawings, calculations, and specifications are finished and is ready for final review before construction. Now, we are quite aware of the news of what's been going on for our listening audience. It's very, very important for them to realize that our energy prices, our costs are basically regulated through regulatory entities across the country. The country is sort of cut up in pies. You have about 11 different regulatory entities. California, Texas, and New York have their own. But we are a part here in the Mid Atlantic region of what is called the PJM uh, region. And the PJM is a regulatory entity that controls the cost of energy, the transfer of energy, what type of energy can be used in that market demographics, and it sets the annual wholesale cost of that energy, which basically that cost is passed directly on to consumers. And we had some very, very historic rate hikes which have taken place here in the PJM going back to 2023. We were looking at, and they measured this based on what is called a megawatt day. And in 2023, the 13 states and District of Columbia, we were paying $34 and 17 cents for what was called a megawatt day. Now, what's important for our listening audience to understand that the PJM region, through the utility entities and their customers, has a total of 65 million customers. When you multiply the $34.17 for that megawatt day, it broke down to $2.2 billion, which was being passed on to the consumers. The regulatory entities also control how much renewable energy can come on to the grid through the entities which basically controls what they call the clearing capacity rate. And the clearing capacity rate is determined by the voting members of the membership for the PJM. Now, the PJM has 1,000 members, and 99.9% of those stockholders and members who have votes are vested in the fossil fuel industry. Let me be clear. That takes in your coal, gas, natural gas, and oil industry. And they set the clearing capacity of how much solar and wind can be used in that 13 state and district Columbia market demographics. And for solar, it's only 1%. And for wind, it's only 3%. And what that means is that 94% of all of the capacity to provide electricity is coming from the fossil fuels sector. Now, when we
No, well,
break,
before I move on from there, though, yeah, and there's an important point that kind of makes sense with the PJM network. It's the oldest network in the United States. You know what I mean. So it's really based on fossil fuels,
yeah,
while the
well,
other networks are kind of are easily more diversifiable. But I take your point.
yeah, well,
Take
the
your point.
point, the point is that you have approximately 3,000 wind and solar projects that have been completed and built and that are ready to come online, but because of the clearing capacity, these projects have not been able to be, they have to be permitted and provided the permission to uplink to the grid in that region, which
Hmm.
in fact brings down the more renewables we bring on, the more it impacts on the cost of energy being passed on to the consumer base in those 13 states. And on the 22nd of September, two Wednesday, Tuesdays ago, we had 13 governors from the 13 states and representatives from the District of Columbia to meet in Philadelphia about this issue because they've been raising holy hell about the high energy rate hike that went into play as of 2024, who we know him as our current standing representative at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. He called a meeting with the fossil fuel industry and the tech industry and said to them, put up $1 billion for my election campaign, and you can basically do what you want to do. Well, we know because of the campaign finance laws that he says a lot of things that you really can't do, but it's a way for him to get that money through other forms such as PACs. And what has taken place since the elections is that in 2024 for 2025, and the annual wholesale auctions take place every July 22nd. It jumped from $34.72 to $269.92, which was the highest rate hike, wholesale annual rate hike in the history of the PJM, which amounted to, for those 65 million customers that are paying those costs that are passed on, it jumped from 2.2 billion to 14.7 billion. And that cost was passed on to us as ratepayers. It was a 686% rate hike. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because Mr. Henderson's organization is one that deals in the finance, and nothing's free. And when developers have to take on additional costs in terms of pass throughs, such as this cost is basically coming on board through the PJM because of the build out of data centers, which takes a tremendous amount of energy. And we have data center campuses throughout the PJM 13 states being built, those that have not already been online. And living in the PJM region, most people are unaware that Northern Virginia, Loudoun County serves as the epicenter for data centers, and 70% of all of our cell phones and technology streams through those data centers. And now that cost is being spread out across the country because of the urgent demand for AI, crypto mining, and blockchain technology. So I asked Mr. Henderson if he could sort of elaborate on how this is impacting the financial sector and the lending sector, which he plays such an important role in. Tony?
Well, the bottom line on your question is, how are AI centers impacting cost structures
Yes.
for renewable energy companies?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
the energy costs that's being passed on to our ratepayers through the regulatory process, because those costs are being passed on to the consumer by way of these regulatory entities through the wholesale rate costs. And does this impact on the actual planning and financing arrangements for developers who are trying to bring projects online?
Yeah, it has multiple impacts on them. Yeah, yeah. First, there's a saying in the AI data center industry, build them, and they shall come. Kind of like the Kevin Costner movie about baseball stadiums. And, that's what AI data centers are doing. They're being built and they know the business will come. And so what one has to remember is that whether or not you agree with it or not, or whether or not you like it or not, the United States and China are in the middle of an AI data center war. The two richest nations on the planet are competing to control AI. One of the most important aspects of AI is the power to power the electricity to power it. And so that this is now a part of our national defense, national security. So people need to keep that in mind, number one. Number two, these AI data centers, small ones may use, you know, 500 megawatts annually, but the larger ones are in gigawatts. Yeah, they have, what we like to call significant gravity to them, significant mass to them, so that when they go into a community, into an area, that gravity significantly impacts prices, impacts the grid, upgrading of the grid, the whole 9 yards. And what our communities and our renewable energy companies need to do is make sure that that massive influx of capital is also accompanied with some kind of community benefit organization tool or some kind of benefit to the community, whether it be workforce development or whatever, to make sure that these data centers are actually integrating and becoming part of the community, understanding that they're increasing the costs on the community and the businesses around the community, and they may be able to provide some discounted services, some funding for other types of programs. But in essence, in my projects, with data centers, and I'm involved in two right now. They've actually been helpful in helping African American solar developers obtain their goal and obtain financing and build their solar projects. Because now you have an off taker, you have the data center that's willing to buy the power.
Well,
And
that's what I was trying to get to, as it relates to where we wanted to go with this conversation. Now, there are different entities who do different things in the solar and renewable energy sector. And one of the things that we do here at the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, we sort of serve as a online digital news source and data storage, almost like storage with our online blog under news and events. And people can get more information on that by going to our website at positivechangepc.com. They can click on our news and events tab. And I was just recently looking at an article that came out of through an online magazine called Evergreen Action. And they basically said this to reinforce what you were just speaking to. Data centers are already increasing energy bills, and this article we have the receipts. Key points. Electric bills are going up around the country, and some of these increases are due to outdated practices that require customers to pay billions of dollars to tech giants through grid connections. And when they're talking about the practice of requiring consumers to pay these bills, they're talking about those regulatory entities such as the PJM and MISO. MISO is another one of our regulatory entities that controls 16 states, and it has approximately 45 million residents, and it goes from the Gulf, from starting down in the deep south and go all the way up through the center of the country, and it has one Canadian province. They have approximately 45 million customers. But the point is, one new analysis ties up tallies up 43 billion in costs in 2024 for just 7 states: Illinois, Maryland, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. Many data centers built recently have electricity demand for small cities. New proposals for data center campuses have power demand incomparable to total power plants in small states. Now, with that being said, Tony, I'm very excited that you mentioned the fact that you have some projects that your company is involved in the finance entity, and there is some African American solar installation and design firms that have been involved in building the power, because this has been one of the basically known facts that 90% of these data centers are being powered by gas turbine technology. And there has been a big issue in Memphis, Tennessee, surrounding a data center which Elon Musk built there 6 years ago. And people are talking about, well, when they build these data centers, yeah, it creates, during the construction, a number of jobs. But after those data centers are built, you have less, we'll have less than 500 people working in that data center. And it can be what we would call a pretty large data center in terms of physical space. But it doesn't take a lot of people to work there, because these are highly technology skilled jobs, and we're talking about the jobs of the future. Well, with that being said, Elon Musk had on the permitting process that they were going to use 15 gas turbines to build the power the data centers that he built in Memphis. When someone went and physically checked, they had 35.
Mhm.
Now, you and I have had this discussion in private before, and you shared with me that they actually have the technology that they can put certain type of caps on top of these stacks on these uh, old coal power plants that many of them are being retrofitted for crypto mining, AI technology, blockchain technology. But what is the problem with this, Tony? Is it the cost of putting in the technology? And we know that renewable energy, as it relates to solar and wind, and solar is is much cost effective, it's cheaper and faster. But when you are allowing these greenhouse gas emissions to escape into the atmosphere, which is creating all kind of health issues as it relates to people who may have respiratory issues. It impacts on real estate values being where these data centers are being built, because it brings down the property values. What is would be your thoughts on what should we be looking at when someone comes and says, well, we want to build a data center in your community? What type of questions should those community residents and those leaders in those communities be asking about how and what they should be demanding of those elected officials that will greenlight these projects? And I
Excellent
know that
question.
that's a level of question.
Excellent question, though. The first thing they should be making sure is that the comprehensive grid for their communities is being upgraded. That it's not just a new transmission line for the AI data center, that the entire grid in the community is being upgraded. Because what we're really looking for is a two-way grid, so power can go two ways, not just one way, two ways. That's one of the keys to improving the power base in the United States, upgrading the grid. So you want to make sure that the data center coming to their community is upgrading the grid for everybody, right? That's number one. Number two, they want to ask the data center, what is their workforce development play? What is the opportunity for people in that community? To get jobs at data centers now, you don't have to go to a 4-year university and then get a master's degree in engineering. There are multiple certification opportunities for different types of jobs at data centers. And that's important to get an understanding of that. And maybe they can partner with an HBCU or a community college, or like we're doing in one of our projects, partnering with a local union to develop a workforce development program so that these data centers can maximize federal tax credits. And that's the next point. The community should look and talk to their local representatives and ask them, okay, if we're doing this and the data centers coming, what does the capital stack look like? How much in tax credits is the AI data center getting for a project? For an example, I've got a data center, small in a blue state, no, excuse me, red state, and the project's about 100 megawatts, and so they're looking for about $120 million. There's the ITC tax credit involved, but it's also in a new market tax credit zone area. And so, new market tax credit zones are tax credits that the Trump administration really loves and can really help significantly reduce the cost of a project. You can get up to $25 million for your project covered from new market tax credits. So then for that, there is a workforce development requirement. There are other requirements to participate in new market tax credits that you have to meet to get the money to do it from the Treasury Department. Community groups need to really understand what are those requirements for those tax credits and make sure they create their community benefit tool or their community benefit agreement focused on some of those priorities. Because the AI data center, particularly if they're in a new market tax credit, and most of them are going into new market tax credit zones, can't access the tax credit without the community participating in it. And that's something the communities really need to understand, that you do have leverage here. And
Well, Tony,
the
Tony,
way to apply it is to educate yourselves.
what my concern is that the Biden and Harris administration, under the Invest in America agenda, they in fact bought in $132 billion in investment. And that investment came about because the Biden and Harris administration put forth one of the most aggressive investment tax credit platforms for infrastructure and for renewable energy in the history of this country. Now, Trump, his first executive orders was to rescind many of those tax credits, and they're impacting manufacturing. I had the privilege of having Mr. Keith Mathis with NISA Energy, who is the only African American who I know who has a solar manufacturing company. He's based out of California, but he was going to be building in his home state of Kentucky. Now, it's very, very interesting how people who are not aware that racism is alive and well and that it impacts on them every day, because the morning that he was going to make the announcement in his hometown in Kentucky, he had the mayor, head of economic development, and city officials. Somebody had leaked that information to the Klan and the Skinhead Nation, and they had a parade down the main street of his small town where he's from in Western Kentucky. Well, that gave him a clear vision of the attitudes, not of the leadership, but of the people where he came from. And at the same time, the investment tax credits for manufacturing. And there's if and I'm gonna be very, very, very clear about that. If you have already broken ground for a project, I think you have to the end of 2027 to have that project completed. But there are various phases for those investment tax credits, but it impacts the manufacturing of those tax credits. And of that $132 billion, we know that approximately 109 billion of those dollars went in red congressional districts, which you indicated that your two of the projects that you've been working on are in red congressional districts. Projects such as the Hyundai plant that was built in Georgia that was recently raided, it was in the news. Q-Cell, which is in Dalton, Georgia, which is in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. What's very interesting about this is that Biden's strategy was to put the majority of this investment in those congressional red districts in the Deep South, where we have a large African American population base, but at the same time, those tax credits being rescinded by his executive order are playing havoc on these renewable energy projects. And I'm going to use this for example as we talk about the automobile industry. As of yesterday, September the 30th, the $37,500 credit, if you were to purchase a new electric vehicle, is no longer, it's gone. For 4,000 for used, it's gone. Now, when you project that out, I was able to get some numbers. The original sunset date for that investment tax credit was December 31st, 2032, which is 7 years from now. But when you project out the loss in sales for the American automobile EV industry is somewhere around $168 billion, because people will no longer be able to take advantage of that tax credit because the GOP has moved it back to September 30th of 2025. So with that being said, you mentioned that there were certain investment tax credits that you were still able to take advantage of, but you can't build these plants and the supply chain operations, and these plants can't be built that quick. So what would be your suggestion for those developers and those corporations that have already committed in investing this money into these red districts, how should they be getting in contact with Tony Henderson and bringing your company on with your strategy and your plan and vision? Because you seem to have a solution to some of these problems. Because we got a mess going on right now. Because in May of this year alone, $1.4 billion in projects were put on hold. So
Yeah.
I'd like for you to sort of respond to that.
And I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap this up too.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
but
understand.
it's a wonderful question. A, you know, we've got to be creative out there. You know, there are energy funds that are kicking in, that are coming and want to participate, but most of these energy funds, are scavengers. But there are some energy funds out there, and I'm associated with a few that truly want to assist communities while generating profit. Yeah, and that's who we like to work with. People can reach me at Tony H. TONYH at imbalance2030, and I'd be happy to talk to them about their projects, their opportunities, their communities, and let them know what we make some suggestions and potentially even bring some investment to their communities. But right now, um, you know, people are scrambling to get their projects done, and so there's money being spent. We need a clearinghouse for these projects. Perhaps, Ron, you can set up a system where they can contact the National Association of Blacks in Solar, NABS, and talk to us through NABS, and and we can help them develop a strategy. Yeah.
Well, for right now, they can contact the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative. We don't have the website up for NABS as of yet.
Mhm.
So I'm still taking as I'm speaking to you. I'm going to be I'm going to be transparent about this. I'm serving presently as the chairman of the board for the National Association of Blacks in Solar, and you're speaking to Mr. Tony Henderson, who is one of our board members and one of our valued partners with NABS, and our organization is ran by Nathaniel Daly, a young, brilliant uh, African American gentleman who we've elected to head the organization because of both myself and Brother Henderson. We're not going to tell on ourselves, but we're both baby boomers. So it's time to pass some of this stuff on to some of these young folk out here. But Tony, I know I've kept you past the 30-minute threshold, but I want to that I've asked you to come on. But I want to thank you for taking time from your very busy schedule to be a guest this morning. And I think that we were able to get a lot of information out to our listening audience. One of the things that I want people to be aware of is that we have some legal issues going on as it relates to what's called the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and there are a bunch of lawsuits that are going on because it was $27 billion involved in that particular funding. About 20 billion was put in the Citibank, and Michael Regan, the former head of the EPA under the Biden and Harris administration, they realized that they could have not gotten all of that money out the door and gotten those programs initiated. Then you have what we call the Solar for All program, which had $7 billion in, and you have about 60 entities that were grantees for that. Some are green banks and other nonprofit organizations. And I know that, Tony, you've been working with a number of these entities around the country. So with that being said, I want our listening audience to understand that you can get in contact with Mr. Henderson. I want you to give out your contact information once again, and I'm going to mention again before I go off the air. But we're going to move on and sort of switch gears and go to another subject matter because Mr. Henderson has to leave us, and we want to thank him for his time this morning.
Well, I appreciate your time. It's a very important discussion. And once again, you can reach me at Tony H at Imbalance 2030, IN as in Nancy, BALANCE 2030, Tony Henderson at imbalance2030.com. And I look forward to future discussions. Thank you, Ron.
Okay. All right. Have a good day, Tony.
You too.
All right. Bye bye. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Tony Henderson, who was our guest today on the platform of Solar Now in the Future with his economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, today is, of course, October 1st, which is the first of the new fiscal year. And unless you've been sleeping under a mountain, not a rock, you know the federal government is being shut down because the Republican GOP has refused to, in fact, sit down and negotiate with the Democratic side of the House and Senate to come to something that makes sense without throwing millions of people off their health care. And we know that these are issues. Now, people will say, well, what does that have to do with renewable energy? Well, it has a great deal to do with renewable energy because if you undercut the staffing and you fire all the people at EPA and at the Department of Energy, and you don't have anyone to implement these programs, well, you can have the best programs in the world. But if you don't have our human beings there who know what they're doing, into our African American community and those federal workers who come to work every day and have the experience in doing what they do every day and are excellent at that. And I take totally offense when during the Biden-Harris administration, there was an initiative which came called the Justice 40 Initiative that indicated that 40% of the investment from these programs must be invested in low and moderate income communities. Now, as I indicated before, there was $132 billion in investment that came online. And we were in the catbird seat as it relates to being able to move this country into another era as it relates to that. Now, I'm going to share with you some information, and you'll understand why I had Mr. Henderson on this week. This article is you can find under our July News and Events tab by logging on to our News and Events tab on PositiveChangePC.com. It's called Tracking New Clean Economy Projects Expansion and Production Announced Across America. This particular article was published by an organization called Clean Energy Works, and their website is e2.org. But they did an excellent job. This article went on to say, President Joe Biden's team left office expressing confidence that the climate legacy was secure because most of the $132 billion private investment in clean energy manufacturing manufacturing spurred by the program was going into Republican districts and states. But Republican members of Congress who spoke out in favor of clean energy, enough members to make the decisive vote block in both the House and the Senate, refused to hold up to their side of the bargain. Trump's large agenda caused strategy of insisting on one big bill coupled with political threats against those would be the foes to whom announced that the past week they would not seek re-election turned to be out to be a so-called winning strategy. Adam and Levine, Director of Policy Analysis for the Natural Resource Defense Council, called this bill a massive hit on both the clean energy economy, U.S. economy as a whole, and the future of climate change from this perspective. It names and identifies 397 projects in 43 states, $132,744,000,000 in investment. For the state of Alabama, 10 projects, $2,819,000. Arkansas, 2 projects, 250 million. Arizona, 13 projects, 6,775,000,000. Now, it also provides the jobs that were created. We're talking a total of 132,000 jobs when you total this, but it gives you all 50 states. And I'm going to look at the red states who got the largest number of projects. Georgia, 33 projects, 12,881,000,000, creating 15,989 job opportunities. Let's look at the next largest state when we began to look at where this money went. Michigan was the largest blue state with 34 projects with 12,514,000,000, creating 12,149 jobs. Then you went to North Carolina, 29 projects, 21,765,259,000, creating 12,757 jobs, new jobs created. Then when we stroll down, we hit Ohio, 19 projects, 7,093,004,993 jobs. Then you go down and you look at my home state of South Carolina, 32 projects, 14,492,500,000, 14,183 new jobs. Tennessee, 25 projects, 5 billion 603,800,000, 5,604 jobs. Texas, 32 projects, 9,311,000,000, 14,102 jobs. Now, it breaks down all 50 states. What's important to realize is that it breaks down it by battery sector, projects by sectors. Batteries, 64 projects, 42,151,000,000, 26,637 jobs. Biofuels, creating, it said, no investment, but 40 jobs. Energy efficiency investment, 6 billion, creating 200 jobs. EV charging infrastructure, 151 projects, 82,875,800,000, creating 64,513 jobs. Then you're talking about geothermal, Grid transmission and electrification, 38 projects, 4,367,659,699 6,993 jobs. Grid transmission and electrification, as I just indicated, 38 projects, 4,367,000,000. And that is so desperately needed, ladies and gentlemen, because this is what Mr. Brother Henderson was talking about grid infrastructure, hydrogen projects, 19 projects, 6,139,600,000, 3,556 jobs. Semiconductors, it was the investment of 5,375,000,000, creating 1,970 jobs. Solar, 94 projects, 17,352,370,000, creating 31,474 jobs. Wind and solar, wind, 28 projects, 4,660,000,000, creating 3,054 jobs. Then it breaks down the projects by the types of energy projects. Generation, 47 projects, 9,521,370,000,000, 3,070 186 projects. Manufacturing, 324 projects, 116,448,459,000 in investment, creating 115,600 jobs. R&D, 16 projects, 698,900,000, creating 1,447 projects. Recycling, repair, and maintenance, 9 projects, 148,500,000, creating 872 jobs. Now it breaks it down by congressional district, which is projects by congressional districts. Republicans, 245 projects, 109 million, 87,000,090, 20,000, creating 8,867 jobs. Democrat projects, 129 in Democratic districts, 20,378,000,000, creating 30,133. Undefined, 23 projects, 3,000,000,000, 278,500,000, 4,034 jobs. And I read that specifically to close this show, to show you how all this has been rescinded, ladies and gentlemen, by the Trump administration. And the investment tax credits have been rescinded. This is why we are going in the economy with this shutdown will go into a tailspin. This is why he's firing people when he doesn't get the report that he wants back from the jobs report. Well, you can't shut this industry down when we are competing with China. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I've come to the end of another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And you know, as we always say at the beginning and the end of this show is brought to you by the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC, which serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses, develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. You also know that this show is brought to you every week by the National Association of Blacks in Solar, and you can get any contact information by contacting me about that organization and our structure. And you have my email is info@positivechangepc.com. You can log on to our website at positivechangepc.com. Please click on our news and events tab. You'll be able to find this show and many other of our shows through our YouTube online digital podcast TV radio network. And as I've indicated, this is brought to you also by the Black Sports Legends Foundation, BSLF HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to hopefully have the director of, of the Maryland Clean Energy Center, which is the Green Bank for the state of Maryland, for our show next week. Is next Wednesday. It'll be a very exciting show. I hope that many of you will listen to this show and will post this up on your platform, media platforms, so we can get the word out for what we're doing here on the platform of Solar Now in the future with its economic impact on Black America. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, we don't want you to meet us here every week. We want you to beat us back here as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And until next week, we say go in peace.